We jump in mamish smack, literally smack in the middle of the lesson on the beginning of page Tes, where we've been speaking a lot about the difference between Geulah and Geulah, not just from the standpoint of Jewish history, but from the standpoint of a consciousness shift, and a shift away from an energy that's mechase anes, that sees the pruta, which was the aspect of prita sivase, the concept of adni sivasei tiftach, of tefillah, of believing that there's a mechadesh, believing that teva mechayev kach and tefillah is meshana the teva. This aspect of openness, shifting, coming out of the kisoy acha tichla pruta prita minakis, from the kisoy, and coming into a place of Eretz Yisrael dika moichin, or an Eretz Yisrael dika way of thinking, way of living, which is all bound up with Emunah, bound up with Nisim, right, with miracles. And the Rebbe taught us that you cannot have Emunah really without Emes. It means Emunah has to be grounded, it has to be in vessels, it has to be guided in certain parameters. We likened it yesterday to a diving board where a person sort of jumps into an endless pool, right, which is the aspect of Emunah. And you have to know which diving board you're jumping off of. And for that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us a mind and a heart, v'yadata hayoim, and it's in the sort of collaboration between these two elements within the human being that can enable a person to arrive at MS. But the thing is, and the Rebbe says, you can't really trust your heart and mind, like we said from Sichas Ran. Most of us are one way or another, we're a bit beshuga, we're a bit crazy. And you have to look for a sane person. And the tzaddikim were sane. The tzaddikim made it. They made it. Rebbe Nachman in Moharan was once hearing about a certain tzaddik who had been nifter, and the Rebbe snapped. And he said, I think in Yiddish, he said, Ibergespringen or something like that. Like that tzaddik just jumped over this whole world. He had no issue with it. He just, like that. Like he was a sane person. He didn't get bogged down. He didn't get dragged into the whole Ilana Desveka, the tree of doubt. Just jumped over all of it. And the tzaddikim are giving us eitzes for that reason. And the Rebbe said it's like a relationship. It's like receiving zera from a tzaddik, because then it's able to go into one's heart and mind, it's able to become rooted and implanted, and it's able to produce and it's able to flourish. And a person needs to be very, very careful in this context from niyuf, right? From pegam einayim, from pegam abris, which is the aspect of receiving eitzas from Rishaim, the aspect of being guided in one's values, guided in one's life from a different place, which is the aspect of the nachash, the aspect of the sitra achra. And obviously, that's the opposite of Har Sinai, which is standing and being mekabel li eitza v'sushia, the Torah that's referred to as eitza and tushia. That's matish koichai, right? Like a person just like zivug is, because over there, and therefore paskazu amasam, because that's the counteraction of Amalek, and which is rooted in the nachash, who bach nachash al chavel v'hita bazuama. That's the bad Eitzah, right? The Eitzah from the other side, and a person stands at the foot of Har Sinai, and that gets counteracted by the energy of the Torah. How does a person stay away from the Eitzah of the other side? Rebbe Nachman says the skula, to be saved from the aspect of niyuf, is tzitzis. And the Rebbe spoke about tzitzis, machas and al-aryam, the aspect of shame, and yafes, right, who walk in to cover over their father. That's the aspect of, or the simla, that's the aspect of tzitzis, that guards against cham. And the Rebbe said that tzitzis is a lashon of being able to see, which is the clarity of eyesight. That is again the opposite of the aspect of loisasuru. Acher levalcha ve'acher nechem. Tzitzis is the aspect of meitzitz min hacharakim. That's basically what we've learned in Torah Zayin until now. Okay. We try to get to Torah Ches so we can start next week a new Torah. All b'siyata d'shmayim. Says that the Rebbe's chus segulatim is a perish. Amar Rabba Bar Chana Amud Taya. This is the aspect of what Rabba Bar Chana said. A certain Taya, which you're going to learn, Seicher Yishmal, a certain merchant, an Arab merchant, said to Rabba Bar Chana, Ta'ach v'lei through the Sinai. Come, and I will show you the Mount Sinai. I'll show you Har Sinai. Azli, I went v'chazoi the Hajalon Akravi. I went and I saw that it was surrounded by scorpions, right? So it's a very, very visceral image. Instead of seeing, 3 million Jewish men, women, children standing at the foot of Har Sinai, scorpions standing at the foot of Har Sinai. Very, very deep. And They were surrounding it, chamr chivarta, or they appeared like chamr chivartas, white donkeys. Vishamati baskol, and I heard emerging a baskol, sha'imeres, that was saying, Oili shenishbati, woe is to me that I swore, that I decreed, va'achshav shenishbati, now that I decreed me meferli. Who's going to undo, to be made for that shvuah, to annul that vow. And the Rashbam says, what does that mean? Shenishbati, it's Hashem speaking, mena galus, that I swore about galus, that there would be exile, kedachsiv kroi tuve benavim, like many of the prophets already said. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu said there's going to be exile. And now that I made a baskal, or rather now that I made a shvuah and said that there should be exile, mi meferli. And that's what's happening. So what a strange thing. Our Sinai, scorpions, white donkeys, what's going on over here? Says the Sinai. What does that mean? Come and I'll show you the mountains of Sinai, Shubachinas Eitzas. This is the aspect again of Eitzas, Kisham Kiblu Targ Eitin, because that's where the 613 mitzvahs came down at our Sinai. Chazal Hadron Le Akrava. And I saw that it was surrounded by scorpions. Hainu Sheish Atzas Nachash, Atzas Rishayim. Right, the snakes and scorpions are always going together, like by Yosef, right? And Mayim, there was no bar, right? Bar Reik Ein B'Mayim, but Chazal say Nashim Akravim Yishba. These two things, like snakes and scorpions, vipers, they go together. And that's the aspect of Atzas Rishayim. Shal Yedeim Eini Cholim Lekabel Atzas Sadikim Zera Emes. And they surround Har Sinai in a protective way where they prevent a person from accessing the guidance of a tzaddik. V'koimu ki chamr chavarta. He says the white donkeys is an aspect of tzitzis, which is how a person is able to guard against, or again to counteract, the atzas hanachash, miniyuf, this aspect of adultery. Like the Gemara tells us, which penalty is greater? Whether a person leaves out the tcheles, right, in the tzitzis, which you know is not ma'akiv, or if a person leaves out the white and only has tcheles. And they answered, this is comparable to a person who is commanded to bring a seal of gold, which is tcheles in this context, right? And also a chaysim of tit, of like cement, right? Hanu lavan, right? Which is the white of the tzitzis, right? And so of course the Gemara is suggesting that the oynish for leaving out tcheles, if you can have tcheles, which is a matter of debate obviously today, and we're going to see Rebbe Nachman sort of makes a hint as to whether or not we should have tcheles today, but Hainu, so that would be the aspect of gold, and the white is like cement, you know. So obviously the Gemara is implying that it's going to be much more severe if a person leaves out the tcheles and if they leave out the lavan. But says the Rebbe, v'zeu chamri is lashon chaymer v'tit, and so the white of the donkeys, these white donkeys, right, chamre chivarta, or rather the aspect of the donkeys, which is chamar, is the aspect of the tzitzis, right, which is the chaymer and the tit. It's just the same word. Cement, the whiteness of the tzitzis. And chivra, of course, is hainu lavan, right? So these two things, both the chamar, because from the standpoint of tit, cement, right, that's being referred to by the Gemara in Menachos referencing the white of the tzitzis, and then chivarta literally means white of the tzitzis, says the Rebbe, ki achshav ze ikar tzitzis. Says the Rebbe, nowadays, we don't have tcheles. Nowadays, the ikar of the tzitzis is the whiteness. And that's a reference to tzitzis, which is coming to counteract the akravi, the nechashim, those that are blocking access to Har Sinai. V'shamati bas kol shaymeres and ma kesher. Right? So what? Okay, fine. So we learned about the eights of the nachash, but how did that come in to Rebbe Nachman's Torah Zayin? Because it was in the context of Geulah. It was in the context of emunah, right? That you cannot have emunah kadas chaber ba emes, but in order to have emes, you have to have eitzes from tzaddikim. So Rebbe Nachman says, beautiful. That's of course why in this context, which is a reference between the epic battle between the tzitzis and the nachash, right, which is the chamr chivarta and the akrave that are blocking access to Har Sinai. Of course, you're going to see in this context a reference to Galus and Geulah. Bas kol sha'imeres oili shenishbati, Perish Rashi, which is Rashbam, al ha-galus, right? And this is a reference to the exile. Hainu, ayidei tzitzis yichadon lav la'atzas ha-tzadikim. Because through tzitzis, a person is able to draw close to the eitz of tzadikim, l'bechinas emes, to the aspect of truth, v'ayidei emes, bo'ila emuna kanal. And through emes, a person comes to emuna, v'ayidei emuna ba'a-galus. And it's because of emuna, or the lack of emuna, that galus came in the first place. And so here, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, oili shenishbati, because that's the battle. And mi meferli is not just like a rhetorical question, even though that's what it means al pip shad, is always a rhetorical question. Over here it's very literal. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying there's an opportunity to be mefer. How? Because over here we see tzitzis, and if we see tzitzis, then we see this this capacity to overcome this like the line of the scorpions holding the line with riot gear, standing, preventing us from getting to our Sinai, right? And who's going to be able to connect to tzitzis in such a way where we can overcome the eights of the nachash v'ayidei emes ba'im la'emuna keniska la'el v'ayidei emuna ba'a Geulah, and through this is going to come the final redemption. V'zeh sheshama charatas Hashem yisbarach ala galus. Over here you hear HaKadosh Baruch Hu's being sort of regretting the galus ki tzitzis shem cham chivra garam kol zeh. Right, because tzitzis, or really lack thereof, has prevented us from being able to overcome the scorpions and be able to rise up and to access the Torah, which is kula zera emes, which is the aspect of the advice of the tzaddikim. We just saw a message just before I came. Somebody sent a message, who was listening to the SHIURIM. Said very beautiful. He said nobody ever gets more advice about anything in his life than marriage. Right? So it's like not only is marriage the aspect of advice, like we're learning. He's a Gewalter of Ori Strum, very, very special. See, he says he's a very, very big mashpia, amazing person. See, he said this incredible thing that you see that there's a connection between advice and marriage. Everybody, Shem Bracha speech, people giving advice. There's a connection between the yichud and it's a good Torah. Okay, and this is the pshat going back to the beginning of the Torah. Ve'ela mishpat masher tasim lifneihem. Ve'ela kol makom shenemar ve'ela moisef. We know. The Chazal tell us anytime it says ve'ela, it's coming to be moisef al rishonos. And even Rashi points that out, right? There's a connection between these laws were set at Sinai and these were set at Sinai, right? Ve'ela is moisef. Zebechinas Yosef. Says the Rebbe, that's the aspect of Yosef at Tzadik, bechinas shmiras habris, bechinas tzitzis. Okay, that's already an aspect to Yosef at Tzadik, because the shomer habris, ve'ela, vav is moisef al rishonos. Also Kabbalistically, the vav, right, is the 6 spheres, which culminate in Yesod, and that's the mid of the bris, that's the mid of Yosef Tzaddik. Hamishpatim, Zebechinas Kula Zera Emes. Once a person has the Bechina of Shmir Sabris, the aspect, right, but not just in a physical aspect, but in all aspects. And we spoke at the very end of yesterday's shir about Ichpatiyut, right, meaning developing this sense, right, for the importance of life, and not the Amalekian aspect of Mikra, which is carry, like we spoke yesterday, right. But a person who develops this Geulah consciousness of really recognizing life is precious, life matters, every aspect of life is full of import and meaning, and that's Geulah consciousness. So when a person has the inyan of Shmir Sabris, which is tzitzis, hamishpatim, zebechinas kula zera emes, this is the aspect of advice that's coming from a place of absolute truth, kavashikass of mishpatei Hashem emes. Tzadku yachtav, right? Mishpatei Hashem emes. The mishpatim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu are connected to emes, and then tzadku, he doesn't bring it, but you can say that tzadku is the very next word, is the reference to tzadikim, right? And the emes that we get from tzadikim, right? Tzadku yachtav. Shezeichel la'atzas tzadikim, right? Mishpatei Hashem emes, tzadku, right? Shezeichel la'atzas tzadikim, lebechinas emes, to the aspect of truth, asher tasim lefneihem, that you shall place before them. And Rebbe Nachman at the beginning brought Chazal, which says, Hushvu isha le'ishlachal dinim shebatayra, that we learn from Nehem that with regard to monetary laws, men and women are the same. Right? The same halachas apply to both. Says Rebbe Nachman, men and women, zebechinas kades chaber ba'emes. This is emuna and emes. The woman is the aspect, the malchus of emuna, and men is the aspect of emes. That's the energy of tiferes. That's the aspect of circles and squares, right? Going back to what we spoke about, that's the aspect of Har Sinai, or really, let's say, Har Bayis from the standpoint of Emunah, and Har Sinai from the aspect of Emes. These two things together. Have to have these two things together. Says Rebbe Nachman, that's what's being referenced here in Chazal, V'zebechinas kades chaber ba'emes. V'zebechinas hushvu isha le'ish. Ki ze ish v'isha mechinas es chabers emes ve'emunah. Ish and Isha, the masculine and the feminine, is the aspect of Emes and Emunah. And Jewish consciousness doesn't see the man as an independent being, nor the woman as an independent being. Right? They need each other. They're two halves of one whole. Because Yiddishkeit is all about integration. That's why marriage is such an important institution in Yiddishkeit, because it's really emblematic. It's not even symbolic. It is emblematic of, it's like a imamish, right? To come together and to become one. And that's really a microcosmic representation of really everything else in Yiddishkeit, which is all about just bringing the two energies together, and making a yichud, until you come to the ultimate yichud and recognize that really this whole reality is incomplete without HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? Who's the ultimate makif HaKlali, who's the ultimate masculine, so to speak, the mashpia and the mekablim. Bringing the two together,
It's from this pasuk exactly that the Zohar learns the system of bringing down neshamas, the difference between bringing down neshamas on a weekday and on a Shabbos, and Geulah, the system of
I'm saying, but from Chazal, that Hushvu Ishal Ish, already in Chazal you see that it speaks about Yichudim. Unbelievable. Right? So Zebechinas Emes Hamuna.
How do we see that from Asher Tasim Lifnehem?
Because Lifnehem is plural, and so Chazal learned from there that it doesn't say, Lifana. Or Lifanav, right? Right? It's Lifnehem. It says both, and that's a reference to both the men and the women in Klal Yisrael. That's a connection, or a hushvu, or an equalizing between Emes and Emunah, Ishvi. Shebezet Talia Geulah, and this is what the Geulah depends on. Kanitzkala El V'zehu, and that's what we learn. Yachos Shiatamidim Loim Debein Mevinim. You might think, right? Again, this is another Ma'am Chazal in that pasuk, that you should think that you just sort of drop the information and let them figure it out. Talmud Loimar, do your best. That Archim Lefneim Keshulchan Arch. That you have to try to lay it out in a way that it's accessible to people. Says Rebbe Nachman. Guess what? Zebechinas Geulah. This is also the aspect of the redemption. Listen to this. Shala Asid is Galu Kol HaChochmas Keshulchan Aruch. If that's not mamish our times, when today everything is accessible, everything is revealed, everything is translated, right? This is the time of the Geulah. Chochmah is just exploding, right? That's the time that we're living in now. So this is effectively the end of Torah Zayin, which is beautiful. Ashreinu. Now, from here, Rebbe Nachman adds a couple of details that were added in a little bit later on, or that Rebbe Nachman might have heard from others, or because I don't know if this is Lashon Rabbeinu. It could have come before Rebbe Nachman got there, so I don't exactly know the history. But over here we have Hashmatas Hashiyachim L'Torah Zayis, extra bits like appendices that were added on. Now let's go through this because this is very important. It says Rebbe Nachman, Atfilu b'chinas emunah. Tefillah, like we learned, is the aspect of faith. The aspect of miracles. Because Teva decides that something is a certain way. And right? And a person davens, they believe that there's a mechadesh that can break nature, that something can happen from a realm beyond. Ayin Shama, that's what we had learned in the beginning of the lesson. And says Rebbe Nachman, which is again Rebbe Nachman, but he's just recording it because the lesson itself is Rebbe Nachman's words, this is Rebbe Nachman's words. He says that therefore tefillah is a skula for memory. Because tefillah, we said, is the aspect of emunah. And v'shikcha is a very deep thing. What does forgetfulness mean? We're going to see this a little bit later on as well in the Rabbi Barbachana stories about where heaven and earth kiss, and day and night, and he puts a basket, and then it's gone, and then the next day he finds it again. It's all which we're going to see that's connected to this. V'shikcha inyan shahayil lefanenu devar ma. It means that we had something a moment ago, and then v'nishkach va'avar meitanu. And then because of our experience of time, where 1 minute follows the next minute, there can be a fundamentally different experience from one moment to the next, which of course isn't true. L'mala me'azman, where nothing's ever forgotten, because there's nothing that was and now is. Everything just is, right? There is no aspect of that, right? In that place, everything just is. From our perspective, so make sure we know who it is before letting him in, right? It's a strange time. From our perspective, we can have shikha. Who inin shahoy lefanenu dvar ma v'nishkach ve'avar meitanu v'yidar chan hagal pi marachas hamazalis. Right, and that is our experience of time or reality that is mushpa from the mazalos, right? That there are always things that are shifting spiritual energies, like the Ramchal describes also in Adar Amarim, right? That there are different iris that are shining at different times, and then it's mamish like just a switchboard, like just, sometimes this is shining, sometimes that is shining, sometimes that, and it's a succession of different spiritual lights that produces the illusion of time, right? Like the R Yaakov says, every hour of the day has a different siruf, has a different has a different revelation of different conjugations of spiritual energies, and that's what we experience as time. And this second is different than that second. But it's not really. It's just that there are different parts of reality that are shining each and every moment that give us the perception of time passing, right? The reality is that in the place where all those lights exist, it's like all systems going. You just flick up all the switches and turn the stadium lights on, Otherwise, it's just one light, and then it goes off, and then another light and goes off. And that's our experience of time, second to second, moment to moment, hour to hour, day by day, and so on. And so from our perspective, there's the concept of forgetting. And fundamentally, this is the contrast to our real, true faith, where we believe in a realm that's lamala min hazman, right? We believe in the aspect, like we learned about igulim, where there's no beginning and no end, right? So you can't definitively point to the beginning of a day, which is, tseis of the previous day, and now we have the night, and then following that we have the day, and that's one day, and then you move to the next day, because that's already a definitive thing that has a beginning and an end. That's the aspect of yosher, of kav, not circles. Igulim is the bechina of circles. What's igulim? Because it has no beginning and it's no end. It's just everything at once. Right? It's everything. That's the aspect of the circle, which is the bechina of Amunah, which is what we're trying to tap into in tefillah as well as in tshuva. Because in tshuva, then we're being megala the reality that which I thought I did that was against the will of God can actually become part and parcel of a growth process, in which case it was part of the story. And that which I thought was outside the circle is actually in the circle, which is the depth of some of the chabura learning at night. So we have the Likutei Moharan chabura, which everybody's welcome to join. But over there we're learning about how Rebbe Nachman says in the Likutei Moharan Tinyana, Torah Chaf Gimel and Chaf Dalid, that a person is dancing in a circle, and sometimes you see a very sad person sitting on the side. You have to grab him by the arm and drag him into the circle, and then he also becomes besimcha. Rebbe Nachman says that we have in ourselves, sometimes we have our happy parts, and we have a part that even when we're really besimcha, there's a part we think, like we said, in contemporary culture, people have to drink their troubles away, and then they can be happy. You have to set aside your sadness, and then you can dance. Rebbe Nachman says that's not simcha. Simcha means where you're able to grab the sadness and you're able to drag them into the dance, and then you can dance with the sadness, and the sadness becomes part of it. Meaning a person is able to recognize that it's not despite the things that are holding me back and frustrating me that I'm dancing, because my emunah is so vast that it's able to encompass those things too, and I'm able to dance with them. And if you really contemplate the mashal and the nimshal, which is very meduyak, it's a circle, right? It's a machal. Meaning I thought that the circle only encompassed these things, and there are things that are out of the circle. And I realize that the circle is so vast that it's able to encompass those things as well. That's the aspect of Emunah. That's the aspect of Igulim. That's the aspect that counteracts this hanhag of the mazalos, where there's a beginning and end to that, and a beginning and end to that, and that's this day, and that day, and the other day, where shikha becomes possible, because that which I knew yesterday, today I don't know. Right? But from the standpoint of Igulim, there's no shikha, because there's no anything. It's just everything is one. Is this clear? It's a little bit of an abstract thing. Yeah? Okay. Says the Rebbe, Zebechinas Emuna. Go back. But if a person believes that everything is rooted in the will of God, and a Kadosh Baruch Hu is mamish, giving life to everything, so it's a very delicate concept. But over there, from that standpoint, there's no forgetfulness. And a person who's plugged into that reality doesn't forget, because there's no distinction between one day and the next. And so it's lo yitachen that a person would know something one day and the next day forget it. Because what does that mean? A person's plugged into the realm where everything just always is. Okay. Now, based on that, come and see a wondrous thing in the words of Chazal, Mem v'samach shabaluchas b'neis hayoimdim. So we had quoted this in the beginning about the Igulim and the Yosher. If you remember, we quoted this in the beginning about how the Mem is the aspect of a Kav, and that's associated with Har Sinai, and the Samach shabaluchas is the aspect of Yerushalayim, Harim Savivla, which is the energy of Amunah, and, like we're saying, the energy of Tshuva, because the person came to the Beis HaMikdash to do Tshuva, and they were connected to the consciousness of Igul, and then they walked away knowing that they're okay, right? And that's the whole thing of the energy of Har Habayis, which, if you want to utilize terminology of Torah Vav, is Ratzai and Shoiv, right? Har Sinai is Ratzai, and that's why they had to be prevented, otherwise they would have run right up the mountain, because the whole thing is Ratzai, and the Beis HaMikdash is the energy of Shoiv. The Beis HaMikdash is a very different energy than Har Sinai, and that's Torah and Tefillah, and that's what he set up. I posted the link to the book yesterday, so you're welcome to read that essay over there, and a lot of other, I think, useful and beautiful content. Okay, so this is Mem.
Surrounded by a bush of roses, right?
What's that?
Sinai was surrounded, was fenced off by a bush of roses, it says.
Yeah?
So you've got,
I'm not familiar with that.
But I think the writer says that
Okay.
a bush of roses, and you can see you've got the eagle, but the rose is also a cow.
Ah, okay, beautiful. Gewaltig. Mem v'samach shabaluchas so mem v'samach shabaluchas b'nei Yisrael oimdim ki mas hu b'chinas shikha. Says the Rebbe, mas is the aspect of forgetfulness, which is the mem and the samach. So why is mas forgetfulness? The Gemara says that you cannot compare a person who learns something 100 times to a person who learns something and reviews it 101 times. Why? Because a person who learns it 100 times might forget, but a person who learns it 101 times shall not forget, or like they'll say here, shan't, right? Shall not forget. Why? Kimas begamatria meya, says the Rebbe, simple, because mem and samach, 40 and 60 is 100. The ad meya shoylet tasar shal shikha, and the Gemara is telling us that 100 is still forgetting. 101 is not forgetting. Mem and Samach is still forgetting. So they wanted to sweeten it, and they said Mem v'Samach hainu mas shebechina shikha b'neis hayu oimdim. You want to fix your mass, you want to fix the 100, which is the aspect of forgetfulness, which is rootedness in this world. You got b'neis hayu oimdim. You want to elevate the mass, which is the shikha. B'neis, you got to elevate yourself to the level of 101, meaning take the 100, which is the aspect of our worldliness, which is really the one, but as it's fragmented down through the tens column into the 100 column, you bring it back to the echad. You bring it back to a realm where all the different mazalos that shine and then don't shine and shine and don't shine are not shine and don't shine. This is shine, we want shining all the time, right? But it goes up and it's nothing, right? It goes up into absolutely one, where everything is lifted up until 101. It's mamish goyness, right? Mem v'samach umas shebechina shikha b'neis hayu oimdim ki neis hu hepech hashikha. And when you have the mem and the samach together, I would say, memela b'neis hayu oimdim, meaning when it's in that form of the mem and the samach, right, and that's how you're producing meya, even though until he says ad then shikha is shoylet, but over there, because it's the mem and the samach, which like we're learning is the Geulah and the yashir, is the men and the women, is the aspect of these of emes and amuna. You're bringing these two things together. Hushvu ishla ish l'chol dinim sheb'tar. I'm sorry, we really have to go until the end. Our mom's running out of time. I'm so sorry, but afterwards, okay. But we want to hear it afterwards, so don't forget it. The da says the Rebbe ki tzitzis shmir l'niyaf, that tzitzis is a protection and a guard against adultery. So he's basically moving through the lesson and he's saying various points that were left out. This is the aspect of tzitzis, like we learned. So that's the aspect of royim b'Shchem, because they carried it al Shchem shneim, which was the aspect of the simla, which Rebbe Nachman told us is tzitzis. So over here, Yaakov Avinu told Yosef, your brothers are royim, they are shepherding b'Shchem, in the city of Shchem. Says Rebbe Nachman, says Rebbe Nachman, Hainu bechinas tzitzis kaniska le'el she shmir l'niyaf. This is the aspect of tzitzis. Hu bechinas shmir sabrish bechinas Yosef, and this is the aspect of Yosef Atzadik himself. V'al kein Amar Yaakov Yosef, go to Shchem. Halei achecha royim b'Shchem shu bechinas shalcha. There's a connection between Yosef and Shchem, because Shchem is tzitzis. Tzitzis is the guard against Shmir Sabris, against Pgama Bris, Shmir Sabris. Yosef is Shmir Sabris. So there's a connection between Yosef and Shchem. Yaakov is telling Yosef, go to your Indian, right? They're royim b'Shchem. That's you. So go there. Because that appears we learned that HaKadosh Baruch Hu said that I'm going to plant a shoot, a planting, a seedling. We learned that a person's receiving the guidance of the tzaddik, which is the zera al yidei eitza shemekabel mimenu v'zeu soyrek, and this is the very the depth of that concept of soyrek. What did Rebbe Nachman use that soyrek for? He connected it to esherka really va'akabsein, which is another pasuk that refers to whistling and thereby gathering, kibbutz galias, gathering everybody together. Soyrek, esherka, same words, same letters, and therefore that's a connection to the Geulah. But over here he says something also very deep. Hu b'china shuruk. This is the aspect of a shuruk, which is one of the nekudas, which is really what's under the reish over there, shuruk, right, where you have 3 points in a diagonal line. Shu tlas tipin, these are 3 drips, 3 drops, and this is the aspect of the 3 mentalities, which is Chochmah, Binah, and Das. What's the connection between shuruk in the context of Geulah that comes through Emunah that's connected to the Zera Emes of a Tzaddik and the shuruk, or at Moichin? Ki atipa ba me'amayach, because zera, we know from Chazal, is rooted in the mayach. Umagia la'klayos, and then it comes down to the kidneys, like we had learned, which is netzach v'shem klei ha'ilada, shemavash l'mazera, right, which are preparing the zera. Kein ha'seichel noy l'gam kein b'mayach umagia anaklayos ya'atzos. And that's the aspect of these three dots, which are the three aspects of Chochmah, Binah, and Das, which are shuruk. And therefore, when it says netati soyrek is netati shuruk, right? And that's the aspect, not just of planting a seedling, which is a metaphor for the Geulah, but it actually refers to the nekuda of shuruk, which is containing the three moichin of Chochmah, Binah, Das, which have which are a hint and a symbol for zera, right? Which begins in the mayach, and that's the kula zera emes of the tzaddik, that's able to bind itself together with our emunah, and then it's emes and emunah, and it's mem and samach, which leads to the one, which leads to benes hayoimtim, which is the consciousness of Geulah. The tlas moichin and bechinas, and these three moichin are themselves the aspect of a pasuk that we quoted at the end of Likutei Moharan Torah Vav, which is hashmein leva am, right? That the heart of this people have become thick, have become fat, like we learned about the very fat geese, right? Which that was that aspect. And they will hear with their ears, and they will see with their eyes, right? And then they will return with their heart, right? These three aspects. Pen yira be'enav, uva aznav yishma, ulavav yavin. They will see with their eyes, hear with their ears, and they will return. Says Rebbe Nachman, this is the aspect of shuruk, which, by the way, is absolutely fascinating, because in Torah Vav, if you're keeping track, in Torah Vav, we learned that these three form a different nekuda. What nekuda did we learn over there? Which nekuda did these 3 points? Not chirik, close segel, right? The 3 points. The 3 points were the segel, and the segel of the nekuda l'yoina of the aleph. And over here, Rebbe Nachman learns that the segel becomes transformed. Again, I'm leaving this all to Jeremy. I'm not doing any of this work. I'm just planting seeds, and then this Jeremy is going to do all the work, right? So it made my life a lot easier now. So the segel gets turned into a shuruk. Unbelievable, very deep, very very deep. All this is endless mysteries. We don't know anything. Mamish. Right? So what is it? That the person didn't want to get close to tzaddikim. Hashmein leva am. The heart was closed up. Penira, etc. But when a person does bind themselves to the tzaddik and receives guidance, as that's the aspect of the kidneys that are advising. Shem klei ilada, which is the aspect of the vessels of birth, which is the Indian of zera. Shemekabel tipe hamayach, that when a person is receiving the tipe hamayach, right, these dots, these drips, these drops that come from the mayach, really, and not just come from the mayach, but that this is the aspect of the guidance of the tzaddik that's moichin gedolim, that the tzaddik is giving us a new brain, a new way of thinking, a new way of looking at the world legamre. So it comes from the mind, hamischalekes l'klas tipin, which splits into these 3 drops of the shuruk. Klas moichin, which is for Chochmah Binah Das, va'az yira be'enav, ova aznav yishma, ulavav yavin, she'em bechinas hashloisha moichin, v'shav v'rafalai. And then a person returns, and a person is healed. V'zeh va'anoichin etatich sayrek, which he's learning is shuruk, kula zera emes. The shuruk is the zera emes, because the shuruk, again, zera begins in the mind, shuruk is 3 dots, that's Chochmah Binah Das, and that's the aspect of the eitzah of the tzaddik, that's zera, that ultimately emerges from the mind because we receive the moyach of the tzaddik, the mentality of the tzaddik. You'll remember that Rebbe Nachman was a goyin adir. He was a Talmud Chacham muflag. He knew everything. And he came to Rebbe Nachman, he said, I got rid of all of my brain. He said, I got rid of my das. I heard one word from Rebbe Nachman, I had 1 drop of das. I heard another word, I had another drop of das. That's called Yeshua. That's called the moon. No, nothing of his own. And he became the reflection of Rebbe Nachman. And again, he didn't like fall into some crazy cult, right? Rebbe Nachman was he was a goyin adir. You see this, every word he writes, he knew the whole thing. He saw something, and he was mavatal himself. Total bittul. And he was zeicha, to become, again, impregnated in this way by the tzaddik. And that's why, again, in Likutei Halachos, he says, I don't need to give haskamas for it, because it's not mine. It's Rebbe Nachman's. Everything I say is just the Rebbe's. No, the Rebbe. Like, there's no, Rebbe Nachman didn't exist, because the moon is nichlal into Yeshua. Nekud aliyana, nekud tachtana. It's one thing. Okay. V'zeh Amar Abba Bar Bar Chana, going back to the Amar Abba Bar Bar Chana, he says there's one element that Rebbe Nachman did in Darshan. V'zeh Ramaz Gam came b'Pesach Dvar, Amar Li Ahud Taya. He opens up the Rabbi Bar Bar Chana story with an Arab merchant. What's the Nakuda there? Uperish Rashi B'chal Makom, Seicher Yishmal. A Taya is a Seicher Yishmal, is an Arab merchant. What does that have to do with anything? Says the Rebbe, Ki Yishmal L'Buchinas Tefillah. We know that Yishmal's very, very powerful thing is Tefillah, 5 prayers a day. You know, the whole thing of Islam, the whole thing of Yishmal, their koyach is prayer. Right, like it says about Yishmal, Mamish Yishmal and Hagar. Hashem has heard your pain. Hashem has received your prayer, and that's the aspect of Emunah which they have. See, he says, okay, so Yishmal is Tefillah. He says, you know what Soicher Yishmal is? An Arab merchant. V'zeu Soicher Malashon Schar, which is Makifim, which is Igulim, that which surrounds. Soicher Yishmael is the eagle of Emunah, the circle of faith. Shebechinas Emunah keniskale'el ve'emunascha svivaisecha. And so the whole thing that Rabbi Bar Bar Chana is describing, which is Har Sinai with the scorpions that are being counteracted, right, that are trying to break the line and breach the boundary, which is the aspect of the white donkeys, which is tzitzis. And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Oili shenishbat v'ashenishbati mimei furli, etc. It all begins with the Akdama of Amar Li Hahutaya, because the whole thing relies on the make it or break it of the Igulim, right? Which is the Igulim of Emunah, which over here are being represented by the Soicher Yishmael, because Soicher is Aramaic for circling, Schar Sechar. V'zeu ufarasta knafecha l'masecha by Boaz and Rus, right? That Rus says to Boaz that you shall have spread your wing, right, to guard and to protect your amasecha. Ki tzitzis to kedusha shem kanfei mitzvah shmir sabris, because again, holy tzitzis, which are kanfei mitzvah, they're the knafayim, right? They're sort of the edges of the garment. Hu shmir sabris v'hu b'china zivug de kedusha, and that's why it came out in the reference between Bayaz and Rus, which is a zivug de kedusha, and she makes reference to tzitzis, or farasta knafecha, which is al knaf the baguette, right? That you shall put tzitzis al knaf. And so, so there's a reference in the context of that holy relationship where the taka was shmir sabris, tak for the bayaz, right? The Gemara says, right, that there was a tremendous shmir sabris because he had a huge nisayin that night, right? And it's a wild thing she put him in that nisayin, but he was oimib in nisayin. There's tikkun abris, and she makes reference to tzitzis, right? You shall be knafecha. Shall protect amasecha. V'zeu sheshol Chagai Anavi. Chagai asks, "Heini Yisa ish b'sar kodesh b'knaf bigdai v'naga b'knafei al alechem." Right? How can a person? What's the translation of this? Can you read that?
Which word?
Who carried consecrated meat?
Yeah, I'm forgetting the context.
His garments.
Yeah.
And this meat came in the corner, came in contact with bread.
Okay, so for Hilchos Tumah. Yeah, well, I don't know what the context is, but okay. Ki pegama bris heder halechem. So what's the connection between pegama bris and what's the symbol of lechem here? We have to look up the context. I apologize, wasn't properly prepared. We find the Gemara, the pasuk in Mishlei refers to an isha zayna to bread, right? And Rebbe Nachman actually made a reference to preparing bread, if you remember, and Torah Beis to zivuk, because over there it was the aspect of Eishes Peitifar, Kiyim HaLechem Asher Eichel, right? And nothing was withheld, right, from Yosef except the lechem, and that was the bechina of Eishes Peitifar, was the bechina of bread. So there also you find Ba'ad Isha Zayin Ad Kikar Lechem, right? And that is tali, right? Or rather, that is going to have some impact on Bisar Kodesh, which over there is going to be obviously a reference to Shmir Sabris, Bisar Kodesh, that a person has holiness even in his flesh, and there's a connection between Bisar Kodesh and the bechina of Knafai Alalachem, Vahavin, Matesha Be'esan Kashdai, and he shall rest Be'esan Kashdai, his strength, and the Keshes, Misham Roya Eben Yisrael, and over there is Avon Uvnin. There's a reference between Ace and Kashdai. Keshes is always the bris, right? We know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought out the Keshes, right, after the Mabul, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Zeis Ois HaBris, this is the bris, and Keshes is connected to a bris. That's why in the time of Rashbi and other times throughout history, there was never a Keshes, because it was replaced by the Tzaddik, and of course the Tzaddik is bris, but Tzaddik is Soid Olam. Tzaddik man, they're not our brisai, right? A Tzaddik is a person who has Shmir Sabris. And so Vatesha Be'esan Kashdai, which is a reference to Shmir Sabris, the end of that pasuk is Misham Roya Even Yisrael. From there, we can foster Even Yisrael. What's Roya? We already learned earlier in the lesson, Shchan Eretz Ure'ei Emuna. Right? We foster faith. And what's Even Yisrael, Misham Roya Even. Even, the Zohar Kodesh tells us, is Av and Ben, right? Even is a conjugation of father and child. Av and Ben. Who's the Av and Ben? Who's Av and Ben? Yisrael, which is Yaakov Avinu and the 12 Shvatim. Why are we making a reference here to Yaakov Avinu and the 12 Shvatim in the context of Keshes, which is a bris? Because who went down to Geulah as a result of Avram Avinu's Pegam Ha'amuna, Kiviyachol, right, on his level of Bama Eda? Rebbe Nachman says Yaakov and his children. Why Yaakov and his children? Do you remember what the symbol for that was? 12 Shvatim?
12 Nischais.
Excellent. 12 Nischais of Tefillah. Right? And they went down because Tefillah goes into exile as a result of a Pegam and Emunah. That's how Rebbe Nachman had set it up over there. The paradigm for Gullus and Geulah is leaving Eretz Yisrael and having to come down to Geulah, to Gullus, which is Mitzrayim, which is all the Geluyos are called Mitzrayim, Al Shem Shem Mitzrayim Yisrael, and ultimately we're all coming back to Eretz Yisrael, right? So it's the collective Geulah and the collective exile, and who goes down to exile is Yaakov and his children, which is the 12 Shvatim. So because of Atasha Be'es and Kashtoi, there's some kind of aspect of either Tikkun Abris or Pegam Abris, Misham Roya Even Yisrael, it's going to impact the Even Yisrael, which is the Av and the Ben, which is Yaakov Avinu and his 12 children, which is the aspect of the Nusach of Tefillah. These two things are connected. And he finishes, Skula L'chayla, which is very good to know. Chas v'shalom, nobody should ever need such a thing. But a Skula L'chayla, how do you translate skula? You don't. A skula for a sick person, we know what a skula is. Lehistakel ala tzitzis, is to look at tzitzis, very deep. Skula for a person's ill, you hang a pair of tzitzis over there. That they should look at tzitzis. V'asaid b'pasuk hine bincha Yosef ba'ilecha. Right, when it says over there, when Yaakov Avinu was very ill, and he was told Yosef is coming, hine bincha Yosef ba'ilecha. And Yosef is the bechin of tzitzis, right? Shmir sabris. And aside from the fact that there's a reference here to tzitzis, if you look in the Kisvei Ari, which we don't have time now, but take a look. There's a whole gematria aspect how in this pasuk is hinted to tzitzis. But besides what Ari says, and he gives you the exact source, Shar tzitzis parak dal ba'aga, and he says ayin sham. Right. Aside from the fact that it's encoded into this pasuk all the amounts, right, of the knots and of the separative circles, right, which is very deep, because tzitzis, which I'll mention just briefly in a minute. We have 2 minutes left. I'll mention something very deep about tzitzis as well. It's literally this, which I'm so happy I shouldn't put it back in my mind because I forgot it. And now shikha, and now I remembered it. Zikarin, skula for Zikarin, Gewalt. Is the Indian of Yosef Tzaddik. V'zeu hine bincha Yosef ba'elecha. Dahine b'chinas tzitzis ayideze v'yischazik Yisrael, and he sat up on the bed because the Indian of chayla, really, if you think about it, what's a chayla? A chayla is an exile. Because exile doesn't mean gullus, like a person's in chains or a person's whatever we think gullus is. Gullus simply means something that isn't where it is supposed to be. That's what gullus means, right? That's the essence of gullus. Something that isn't in its proper state. That means that a person who's supposed to be at a job and gets fired, right, whatever. I guess they weren't supposed to be at the job, but that's not a good example. But a person who's healthy, that's how a person's supposed to function. And a person becomes ill, is in exile. Meaning that the health is in exile, is not where it's supposed to be. A person's meant to be in Yerushalayim. They're in London. They're in Gullus, right? Okay, Yerushalayim is also Gullus now, whatever, but it's less. But a person's in exile. It's not where we're supposed to be. There's an aspect of us that's supposed to be in Eretz Yisrael. And so the whole thing of illness is also exile. That's the connection more broadly to the lesson, not just mentioning a sick person, because sickness is also a kind of exile. Or you could also say that Gevalt exile is a certain kind of sickness. It goes both ways. We're mamish sick, right? We're very distant from where we're supposed to be. We want healing, tzitzis, taking our bris, kulazera emes, the eitz of tzaddikim, and this is very, very important. With the last minute left, I just want to say a very brief thing about tzitzis. First of all, I know Rabbi Yitzi is probably thinking it already, because I sort of mentioned it, that tzitzis are kav, right, the lines that are hanging down, and the igulim. That's literally how you make tzitzis, is igulim and yosher. And I'll say even stronger than that, which is a bit counterintuitive, and you'll bear with me because both have both. But the last minute left is that tzitzis, and that's where I'm saying this, have the aspect of tied up. And that's right, and that's the 1/3 of the tzitzis is tied up, all the knots, and that's going to be the aspect of our Sinai. That's the aspect of closing up. That's the energy of din. That's the aspect of the ish, the ms, where things are definitive. That's the mem, and then the free-flowing strings that hang down, which are 2/3, because you got to have always more free-flowing than knotted. Right? The free-flowing is the b'china of isha, is the b'china of emuna. That's the things that hang down. Now the thing is, we just said a minute ago, is that it should be flipped, because the igulim is the aspect of the knots, because there they turn around, and the yosher is the b'china of the free-flowing, which is really the energy of emuna. And the answer is kares chabura. You need a little bit of ish and isha. You need a little bit of isha and ish. They're both, and that's the ultimate klalius. That's the ultimate achdus. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should help us live these things and not just ramble about them at 6 o'clock in the morning. Thank you so much. Ashreinu.